Hope you guys are ready to get this last semester done, and hope you had a nice holiday off. So let's get to business. We're doing the trigger point course. Chapter 1, we're going over the nature of muscles and trigger points. I feel like a lot of this is going to be review. You might learn some new things too these first few weeks, but just buckle up. Come on. So there are 3 primary functions of muscles. One is support. So this muscles support the body and internal organs. Number 2 would be movement. Without muscles, we can't do any moving, walking, chewing, breathing, etc. 3, muscles produce heat. So muscles do regulate your body temperature. That kind of, it makes me think of like when elderly people, they're kind of, less muscular. They sit around a little bit more. They tend to be more cold. So you have your older population that less muscle mass, they tend to be a little colder. Hope that makes sense for you guys. 3 types of muscles. You should know this by now. We have skeletal, visceral, and cardiac. So skeletal would be your voluntary muscles. These are striated. So this would be the muscles that say you're going to pick something up and you're intentionally using these muscles. Visceral would be muscles that line your organs. They're involuntary. And they are non-striated. Last, you have your smooth muscle or your cardiac. Again, this is also involuntary, but it's striated, right? So these involuntary muscles, types of muscles, just work without your knowledge. I'm going to move over to the picture on the right, the little table here. So your skeletal muscles, here are some of the main features, and there's also a picture of what those skeletal muscles might look like under a microscope. Obviously, this is a drawing of a sort. All right, so skeletal muscle, the fibers are striated. They tend to be tubular and multi-nucleated. So a lot of nucleus or nuclei. They're voluntary. And they're usually attached to the skeleton or bone. Hence the term skeletal muscle. So these would be all your muscles that you would think of that we learned in kinesiology. Next, smooth muscle. Again, these fibers are non-striated, so you can kind of see they don't have those lines, right? They are spindle-shaped and uninucleated, so one nucleus per fiber. Involuntary, and they're usually covering the wall of your internal organs. So think of any of your organs and that smooth muscle. It's going to be a different type of muscle, obviously, from what your skeletal muscles look like and function. Cardiac muscle, they give this its own category because it is involuntary, but it's also striated, right? And it has a single nucleus. And this is covering the walls of your heart, which is why it's called the cardiac muscle. Please don't get that wrong on any test. Right, we have 4 principal characteristics of muscles. One would be your excitability or your irritability. What this means is this is the ability to receive and respond to a stimulus or stimuli via the nerve impulse. All right. Think about when you're excited, you're feeling fired up. Muscles have that characteristic. All right. Receives a nerve impulse so that it can carry out a function. Contractibility. Think of our muscles contracting. So this is the ability to shorten when any kind of stimuli is received internally or externally. So excitability, contractibility, we have extensibility. So you can shorten, but now we can stretch. Think of you extending your arms to reach for something. You are stretching those muscles. And last, we have elasticity. Think of an elastic rubber band, This is the ability to return to its normal shape after it is either extended or contracted. So obviously stretch a rubber band and let go, and it goes back to its normal shape. We have two types of skeletal muscles that we're going to go over. You have your phasic and your tonic, which we call postural. Right? Phasic produces something called a phasic contraction. So this is what you need to move. Postural, I'm just going to bounce to the other side so you can see the difference. But each one, they're kind of opposites, right? A postural muscle produces tonic contraction. So this is a sustained partial contraction. It does not produce movement of the attachment sites. So just think, say you're sitting upright for a while with really good posture. You need your postural muscles to be in a slightly contracted state to keep you upright. I hope that makes sense. All right, going back to phasic. So phasic produces a contraction. It tends to be a fast twitch fiber. Just think of you doing something quickly. All right, you need those muscles, say, running from a bully or an animal running from a predator, right? You need these phasic muscles to be quick, fast twitch fibers so that you can get the heck out of there, right? It produces fast, rapid movements. There is a low capillary supply. They tend to fatigue quicker. I'm sure you've all worked out or done something repetitively, and then all of a sudden that muscle starts to burn. All right, that's because it's a phasic muscle. Right, it gets tired faster. Also, phasic muscles have the ability for the lactic acid to accumulate rapidly. So lactic acid is what will make you sore after a workout or after a hike or after doing something that you tend to not really do often. Examples of some phasic muscles would be your traps, your rhomboids, glutes, and abs. If you do some crunches, you're going to feel it the next day, right? Sit-ups, crunches, whatnot. Now we have our postural muscles. Now, some of these muscles can also be both, depending on what is going on and what function you're trying to carry out. I know that's confusing. All right, so postural or tonic muscles, again, produce your tonic contraction, sustained partial contraction, right? These are slow twitch fibers. So we need these fibers to not get tired quickly, and we need them to kind of hold on to that posture, right? These are anti-gravity muscles. So if you were to do a plank, so act like you're doing a push-up, your arms are straight, toes on the ground, all of a sudden you're going to feel those abdominal muscles start to, kind of shake, all right? These are your anti-gravity muscles. I know I said phasic would be abs, but in this instance, when you're trying to use those muscles as postural, this is where these properties will engage. They tend to have a high capillary supply. We need a lot of blood going to those muscles because it is staying in a partially contracted state. And also with this, we have muscular disturbances. So this can cause shortening of the fibers. This is why when someone has postural issues, with time, those fibers become shortened, and then the opposite fibers might become weak. And then you now have a imbalance or dysfunction with your symmetry, right? Postural muscles also create minimal lactic acid buildup. So these would be like your erectors. Your SCM is a big one. Your QL, quadratus lumborum. So that's kind of an example. You guys have seen and heard me talk about the hip being elevated because the QL muscle is tight. Well, through time, the muscular disturbance have caused these muscles to shorten, right? So that's why they are now in this new state of a shortened posture and bringing that hip up. Normal muscle should feel supple, right? And elastic. You can easily palpate it. It should not be tender when you palpate it. And it'll return to its normal shape during healthy contraction. So this is what we're looking for normal muscle. Dysfunctional muscle. It does not return to normal shape after contraction. So this is when you might get the trigger points or adhesions that start to form because those fibers contracted and never went back, right? It's not going to be the whole muscle, but it's going to be specific fibers or a clump of fibers. You have a lower reduction of blood flow, lower reduction of lymph drainage, and a decreased range of motion. So if you have chronically contracted muscle, again, it can result in increased muscle tone. Not good increased muscle tone, right? And this might give you resistance to palpation or decreased suppleness. So this is when you're feeling a muscle and you're like, oh, you're really tight. This is what we're talking about when you're feeling a tight muscle or not. A lot of times dysfunctional muscle can start to turn into impaired range of motion and weakness in function. So dysfunction can also alter your overall health. We've learned that everything's connected, right? When one area has dysfunction, it can creep up and cause dysfunction in another area. Muscular dysfunction can alter overall health and well-being when constriction is chronic. So chronic dysfunction results in reduced blood flow, reduced lymph drainage, and suppressed nervous intervention. All right, so the nerves aren't functioning properly that go to this muscle. This is where the person might have numbness and tingling because maybe the nerve is being pinched, right? Or a nervous system that excites quickly. Maybe they're overly sensitive or overly stimulated in that specific area. Trigger points. This is what it's all about. Trigger points, at least if they're active, are painful when compressed. They refer in pain to other areas of the body. And we're going to learn all about certain muscles and where the referred pain is in this semester. It can cause autonomic disturbances. So tension can cause, visual disturbances, redness, your eyes to water, mucous membranes to be inflamed. It also can cause almost like a vertigo feeling, all right? If someone has really tight neck muscles or scalene muscles, it can kind of trigger that dizziness that vertigo would bring to your client. There is a reduction in local vascular activity, right? We're not getting nutrients in and out of that area very well. And that's why massage therapy is so important, because we're getting those nutrients in and we're kind of helping the body rid that area of like lactic acid or cellular debris. There can also be skin temperature changes. Remember, inflammation tends to feel warm to the touch. You might even see some redness, all right? So color changes. How do these bad boys begin? The easy way to say it is muscle strain, overuse, or postural disturbances can cause a trigger point. When these things happen, the site of that where the trigger point is formed becomes overly sensitive. So the nerves are overly sensitive. There's increased cellular metabolism, so chemicals. There's a chemical change going on in this muscle. The chemical change technically is too much calcium in that area. You don't have the ATP pulling it out, and therefore you have this buildup where there's no blood flow or lower blood flow to that area, right? Lower blood flow means decreased circulation, loss of oxygen and nutrients. Active trigger points. Again, they produce pain. The pain is usually referred, so you push on one area and you feel it somewhere else. Maybe in your neck or shoulder and you feel it in your arm, right? Myofascial pain is often steady, deep, dull, and aching. So if you have trigger points in the fascia and not quite just muscle fiber, and people are working on those areas, it can feel like a really deep, dull ache, okay? Latent trigger points. These are far more frequent. You might feel a knot or something, you push it and it doesn't refer pain, all right? It might not even hurt, all right? This is found in muscular constriction. It can become active by chronic overload, repetitive stress, compression, chilling of muscle, and there's a lot of other things that can cause these latent trigger points to be active. Ischemic compression of trigger points. All right, so when we find a trigger point, we're going to want to push on it, right? All right, so pushing on this trigger point may cause local twitch response in the muscle. So if you notice there's a twitch or a spasm going on, we're going to try to deal with this trigger point in a more gentle way. All right, so we're going to compress the trigger point for 15 to 20 seconds. You'll read online that there's a lot of different holds for how long, I should say, how long you should hold a trigger point. There's 12 to 18, like there's a bunch. So for our sake, we're going to say 15 to 20, right? You're going to massage the surrounding muscles to reduce taut bands. So we're not just poking on, obviously poking on trigger points and that's everything we're doing, because that's really, really aggressive. So we also want to add some soothing massage to this. So soothe all those muscles around the trigger point. There's also the spray and stretch application. I've never done this, but this is when you have your cooling spray. You spray it, it kind of gives the body that cryotherapy response, and then you can stretch. You can also apply moist heat to the area. So moist heat afterwards will increase the circulation. So a lot of times I tell my clients, if you're sore, do what you normally do for soreness, but heat will soothe the muscle, ice will bring your inflammation down. So I tell them their best bet is to do contrast therapy to kind of ease any aches and pains after a massage. And of course, drink lots of water, right? All right. That concludes chapter 1 for you guys. And that's about it. All right.